Hello, I'm Ceri Griffiths and this is Katie Sue. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a Christmas home decor piece using the MDF Christmas word kit. So let's take a quick look at what I'm referring to. So the MDF kit comes in two pieces. We do have the base and we have the Christmas word. Now, when you receive it, it's actually going to be this color, which is the MDF color. And what I've done is I've just taken some basic acrylic paint. I've taken white acrylic paint. If you've got white gesso at home, go ahead and just paint this. The white color will make everything else that you put on top of it brighter because the MDF color being brown would obviously dull down any color. So I've done that ahead of time because the sponging technique I use to paint, I'm going to repaint this one in a gold anyway, so you'll see it again then. So let's take a look at what we're going to do with the base first of all. So here we have the base. The base is being sponged white, as I said. It's fully dried. It doesn't take long for it to dry when you do the sponging method. Now I want to make this look a little more opulent. So what we're going to do is we're going to decoupage or layer on some tissue paper. Now tissue paper for me, this is just bought from the gift wrap shop. This is just the tissue paper you'll find in a pack. And I've taken some of this and I've cut a piece of it roughly the size of my base. So that's what we're looking to do here. Now, how am I going to attach that is the first question you're going to ask. Now, there are a few options out there. I'm going to use a product called Mod Podge, or you could use a collage medium, or you could actually use white PVA glue and just brush it on. Any of those will do. They're equally as good. It just depends on what you've got to hand. So I'm just going to take quite a wide brush, just a regular brush, and I'm going to brush on this. Now, it's important at this point, if you are working on the kitchen table, the dining room table, the kitchen counter, make sure you put something down. I'll put a washable surface on here just so that I don't have any problems with this. The other thing I'm going to use is I'm using just a piece of plastic. It's a scraper that we use here. Anything that looks similar to that gives me something I can actually work air bubbles out of with. So I'm just going to put my PVA on here. Not my PVA, my Mod Podge on here, and I'm putting a reasonable coat on. I'm not being too stingy with it. I want to make sure there's a coat that's going to bond everything to the tissue paper when I put it on there. So put it on there, make sure I've got no lumps or anything in it, and then I'm going to take my tissue paper and I'm literally going to lay it like right on top. Once it's on top, I'm going to start in the middle and using my card, I'm going to work my way to the ends. Now, if you do get a crease, you can lift this back up and then relay it down. And what you're aiming to do is to get it nice and smoothly adhered to the surface below. Now, if you do get the odd wrinkle in it, it's not the end of the world, but it's something that's an easy cure if you just use something like a plastic scraper. Now, once I'm happy that's all on there, I'm not trimming the edges off. I will trim those off when the thing is fully dried, and I've got a tip or a trick for that one as well. So once that's on there and I see that I've got no air bubbles underneath, I'm then going to take another layer of the Mod Podge or your PVA or your collage medium and give it another coating over the top. And this will just make sure it's all firmly stuck down. It'll also give it almost like a varnish effect so that you've got some sort of seal for when you add the other elements on top of it. So just put that over there. Now this doesn't take that long to dry, but I do want to make sure it's fully dried when I go on to the next stage. So I'm going to put this to one side at the moment. Whenever you finish working with any sort of glue or collage medium, as soon as you finish, make sure you put your brush into a glass of water, just because that way your brush will stay soft and you'll be able to use it later on, or it'll make it easier when you're cleaning up. And if you're anything like me, always put the lid on your glue because I can be clumsy. I don't want glue all over the place. So that's the base done. Now I'm going to put that somewhere to dry. As I said, this will probably dry in about half an hour, but to be honest with you, the clock's not ticking. You can put it anywhere and come back to it later on. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to pull in the Christmas word itself, and I'm going to show you that sponging technique I was talking about. So here is the Christmas word that I've already painted white and it's fully dried. Again, make sure you put it onto a surface that's actually not going to get damaged if you get paint on it, and you could occasionally get paint on it. Now, I did say about the sponging technique I like to use for painting MDF. I just go to my inexpensive stores, and under £1 or under $1, you can usually get a sponge like this. Sometimes you'll find a multi-pack. If I have any word of advice, always go to the baby aisle. You usually find there's lots of sponges in that arm. They come in a multi-pack. All I'm going to do then, so I'm just going to take a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut it into smaller pieces that I can use. Now, I will use the piece of sponge and then I can throw it away afterwards, which means I'm not actually having to wash it up, and it's an inexpensive way of doing it. If, however, you are someone who wants to wash them, as soon as you finish using them, put them into a bowl of water, give them a little bit of squeeze to make sure you get all of the excess paint out, and then you can use them time and time again. But as you can see, out of one sponge, I've got 8 pieces, and I could have cut those smaller. So let's put those to one side and look at painting. Now, for this, I'm going to put a glove on because I just don't want to get paint all over the place for the next bit, because I don't want to get paint into any of the clay I'm using. It's not a necessary step. It just happens to be that's what I wish to do. Now, I'm going to be using an acrylic paint that is a gold, or it's a vintage type gold colour. I like using acrylic paints that come in these small bottles, but any acrylic paint will do, to be honest with you. You can just go to any craft store, even the stationery supply store has probably got paints. You can even use it in a tube. You don't necessarily need it in a bottle. The one in the tubes are probably a little more viscous, a little stiffer. You might want to add just a little bit of touch of water to that to soften it back a bit. But in all honesty, it's probably better less water you add, because you don't want it soaking in too much. Now, I'm going to put mine onto, this is just a ceramic tile which I'm using for a palette. You could put this onto a plate, you could put it onto a paper plate, you could put it into a paint palette, whichever you feel. So that's just where I'm putting my paint. Now I'm going to dab that in and dab it off again, and then I'm going to come in and literally just pounce that on and off the word. Now, this was how I did the white acrylic paint as well. It goes on, it gives it a slight texture, which I actually like, which is one of the reasons I use this. I end up with no brush marks this way. Now, when you're doing this, don't put too much acrylic paint onto your tile. You can always add more. It's harder to take it and put it back in the pot. So I always like to just keep adding to it if I need it. That way I cut down on the amount of wasted product I'm using. So you see it does cover quite quickly. If it's got the odd patchiness to it, I actually don't mind that. And these tabs here, I try to keep these relatively clear, because those are the ones that have been engineered to go into the slots in the base. And obviously, the more paint you add to those, the thicker you make them, the more likely you are to have a problem if you're trying to get that into the hole and you find it's not fitting. It's probably because you've got too much paint on the tab at the bottom, but you can always wipe it off after you've finished painting the whole word. So there you go, that's given me a good coating. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to run my finger along there, just take off the little bit of excess paint, just in case I have a problem. Now, if you find that once you've done this and it's dried, it looks a bit patchy and you don't want that look, you can always give it a second coating. Just wait for the first one to dry. So now I'm going to put this to one side. Let's take a look at the variety of molds I'm going to use within this project itself. Now, for this project, I'm going to actually show you a variety of molds that I've used to create the elements that we're going to use in the final project. Now, the focus of this Christmas word is going to be hellebores, or the Christmas rose mold, which we're going to show you how to make and paint anyway. But the other elements we're going to use, I'm going to introduce them to you, but there will be a link in the description box to each of them, and they each have a supporting video as well to show you how they're painted and how they're finished off. So look out for that one. So first of all, I'm going to look at the holly, mistletoe and berries, which is this one. So if I turn that around and just get another little look at that, there you go. Now, this does turn out some very detailed pieces. Now, you've got the traditional green holly, which you'll see better if I actually just lay it in place there. But I've actually then painted some up so that I have a variegated version. And then we've got mistletoe as well, and we've got the berries to go with it. So you'll see these in use as we go along, but that's all that we're going to use from that one. So that gives me a variety of foliage in the background. This one is actually the blackberry leaf and the oak leaf mold. Again, as you can see by the amount of detail in that, it's got exquisite detailing. So turn that around there, and as you can see, it's quite a nice size mold. And from that, I've made a variety of the leaves, and I've used the oak leaves as well. Now, all of these are made with air drying clay, and all of the air drying clay and the variety of colours is actually on the KTC website, so make sure to look out for that one. So that will give me a variety of leaves as well. Now, I'm going to go down the route where we've got actually holly, berry, nuts and citrus slices and stuff like that. So this is the nuts and berry mould. If we look here, we've got 2 parts to make a blackberry. We've got a walnut shell, 2 halves can be made into a whole. We've got an almond, we've got a cap for an acorn, and we've got the acorn itself. So I'm going to use several of these. Now, as you can see, if you paint them up, they become really realistic and lifelike. The blackberries, again, they can be made wired or unwired, and the videos that there'll be a link to will show you how to do all of these elements. Again, I put 2 pieces of the almond together and painted it up. That's one of the little caps. And if you're someone out there who molds and models little fairy folk, they make great little berries for little fairy folk. And that's part of the walnut casing. So if you put 2 of those together, again, you'll get that. And the instructional video you'll see on those will show you how you do all the painting and the dusting for those all the way through. Now, I am using air dry clay for all of these, so it's actually lightweight. Now, next we've got winter spices. And in this one, we've got, if we look here, we've got star anise, we've got an orange slice, but it could easily be lemon or lime or any other citrus fruit you like. And then we've got a cinnamon stick at the bottom. Now, the star anise is a nice little element that we make. As you can see there, very detailed. A little bit of painting gives me the orange, but equally it could be made into a lime, or it could be made into a lemon. So you could do some really fun things. Say you're doing a cheesecake and you wanted to put limes around the edge of a key lime pie. That would be a fabulous way to do that. And then we've got the cinnamon sticks. Now, cinnamon sticks are great, but if you're someone, again, who does modeling, those could look like logs on the side of a cabin. So lots of interesting stuff there. That's easily done. And then one of the last molds is actually the pine cones mold. It's probably one of my favorite Christmas molds. You've got pine cones and they come in 3 different sizes, large, medium, small. They do have a groove here. So if you wanted to put them back to back and you wanted to put them onto a wire and incorporate them in a wreath, that's easily done. The detail is exquisite in them when they come out. So as you can see, you've got some really detailed pieces here. Now, I like to bring the detail out further, and don't forget you can do them in white as well. So depending on you, what colour you use. I like to use a bit of gilding wax. Gilding wax is readily available in craft stores, and just a little bit of gilding wax rubbed onto the on the front of them will give you a piece where it will highlight all of those pieces on the pine cone. And that looks absolutely wonderful when it's in the finished project. Now, the one we are going to be making is actually the hellebore. So I'm going to actually clear this away and then prep myself ready to do the hellebore mold. So here we are, we've got the hellebore mold. Now, the hellebore, the Christmas rose mold, comes with 3 different sizes of the flower and 3 different sizes of the leaves. So if we take a close look at that, there you go, you can see the amount of detail that's captured in that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to make one of the big ones, because you can see here the sizes they are, and a leaf, just to show you how easy it is to capture all of that. Now I'm taking a little bit of white vegetable fat, and that's a vegetable fat and not an animal fat. If you don't have access to that, you could just use some cornstarch or corn flour in a puff, and then you tap that down into the mold and brush it back out. So I tend to use the corn flour, cornstarch, if my fingers are actually sticky. I'm going to take a little bit of the white air drying clay. Now, you can get into measuring this. I tend to just roll a ball and press it into the middle and then work it out into the petals. Because this is an air drying clay and because it's lightweight and soft, it is very, very forgiving. If it doesn't work the first time, you can roll it back into a ball and do it the second time. So as you can see, I've just worked that down into the mold. If I lift it up slightly, you can see I've worked it out so I can see all of the edges. Now, if you wanted, you could take something like a scraper and just flat the back there just to make sure it's nice and smooth. I then open the mold up, and because it's very high quality silicone, you can see it comes out really, really easily. Now, obviously, I don't want to dry it flat. So a nice trick I like to do is I take a piece of kitchen paper or a kitchen towel and I'll scrunch it into a ball and then I'll unscrunch it. And what that will do, it will give me a textured surface to actually lay my flower upon. So I come in, I'll just give each of the petals a slight pinch, and then I'll take my bit of tissue paper or kitchen paper and I will just sit it in there. So as it dries, it then comes into something that's got more of a realistic shape. So put that to one side a second so we can then look at the leaves. Now for the leaves, I'm using, again, the air dry clay. This is actually the light green air dry clay, but you can actually use the white and then color it down with a little bit of ink or maybe a little bit of acrylic paint or maybe even dust food color if you've got any. So I roll it into a basic sausage shape. I like to work from the top of the leaf down, and I'm pressing down into the mold, little rocking motion. When there's any left over at the end, I swipe it away with my thumb and I work back and forth. Just pull it off the edge there. There you go. Now, if you do find you've got too little, you can always add a little bit more in. If you find you've got too much, just swipe off the end and you'll be fine. Once that's in there, I just pull that back. And again, I get a nicely detailed molded piece. I'm then going to fold it down the middle, a bit like a taco. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to lay it again on my bit of kitchen towel, just to make sure it's all drying into a nice shape. So let me just clean the decks down a bit and we'll show you how I actually paint one of these up. So here we go. It's not even fully dry. It's just semi-dry, but that's okay. I'm going to be using watercolor paints for this. You can use acrylics. Now I'm just going to come in and I'm going to spritz on top of the greens and the yellows here. I need so very little. I'm not going to end up using a palette. I'm just going to take a little bit of the light green and I'm going to come in and sort of put a little bit where the petal meets the center of the flower. Now once I've done that, I'm going to take just a little bit of water on my kitchen towel, just a little bit, squeeze it in, squeeze it out, and now I'm just going to give that a little bit of a wipe, and what that will do is it will almost smear that green so that you've got a softer color. Now, alternatively, you could come in and maybe use a dust eyeshadow to give yourself that effect. But if you're using dust on there, you need to set the dust. I would say use an inexpensive hairspray and just spray over the top, because this isn't a food item. It's not meant to be made onto a cake or an edible medium. You are very much okay to do that. So then I'm going to take my brush, which has been cleaned. I'm going to take a little bit of the yellow and I'm just going to come round, and I'm not planning to paint in the whole of the center yellow, because I'm then going to come in and take a little bit of orange and just catch a little bit of the heads of that center with the orange. So once it's dried, you'll have something that's got variety to it, and you want that variety in it. Now, let's move on and talk about finishing off that base we were looking at. So here we are, it's completely dried now, and I would say probably about 15 minutes has passed since I did this. So it is now fully dried. It's only a thin coat, I'm not worried about it. Now, there are a couple of ways of cleaning this off, or cleaning the edges off. If you wish, you could turn this over and run a craft knife around the edge, or you could take a small scissors and actually cut your way as close as you can to the edge of this piece here. But for me, the most effective way to do this is I take an emery board, just an emery board you would do your nails with, or I'll get some sandpaper or glass paper, and then what I'm doing is just in a downward action. I'm not rubbing back and forward, just in a downward action. As you can see, by doing that, it just gives me a nice clean cut to the edge, and it means I've got no fringing, nothing like that. It doesn't take much. The tissue paper is not that thick, so it's a nice way to cut that into a clean line. So once once that's done, after you've gone all the way around it, the other thing you need is to actually work on the holes in the middle. I tend to just come in and push them out with the point of a knife and clean them up that way. If you've got an emery board that will fit through the gap, all well and good. You can just push the emery board through occasionally and that'll clean it out for you. You do want to make sure that there's nothing like glue or Mod Podge or something stuck in that gap, because that will thicken it up for you. So let's see about attaching the wood to the base. So here we are, here are our finished pieces, completely cleaned down, completely dried and ready to go. I did give this a second coat, so as you can see it's a lot more solid colour, but that's a personal choice. You could actually go in and do 2 or 3 different shades of gold on here if you wanted. Anyway, your choice. You could even do it in red. So now what I'm going to do is, if you're somebody who wanted to keep this project but actually take the wood out to flat pack it, don't glue it down. These are actually manufactured, so it's quite a tight fit into this gap anyway. But for me, let's move that up. I'm actually going to use a bit of hot glue gun. Now, if you're not using a hot glue gun, you can use a gel glue, or you could use a PVA glue, because effectively you're gluing wood to wood. So you can see I'm not going mad with my glue gun. I'm just going to slot those in. As I said, they're manufactured really well, so they sit in very nice and tightly. I'm not worried that there's little tiny bits of glue there. I'm not going to see it in the finished project. Now, because of the overhead camera, sorry about that bang, because of the overhead camera, I've got a block to put behind this purely so that I can work to give you an overhead of this. Now, the next element I want to do with this is I'm actually wanting to put in some sort of lighting to this to add the wow factor to it. So you can buy strings of lights anywhere around at the moment. I bought one of these that's actually on a cork, so it's meant to be for a bottle, but you can get a little battery operated one as well. And I bought this because I wanted the lights to be really quite a fine light, so, and that's what I'm working for. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick the switch behind the letter C. So let me just put that at the back, and all I'm doing, obviously make sure the switch is pointing up. I'm going to put a line of hot glue down the back of the battery piece, and I'm going to stick it into the back here just so it's nicely secured in place. Now, I'm then going to wrap my wires all the way around. Now, you may be asking yourself, why is he wrapping the wire around, putting it at the back when actually the word is going to be at the front? I'm putting it at the back because should I display this up against a wall, when the lights are turned on, then the word Christmas will actually be backlit. So I'll get my wires tied up here. So let's pull this around. Try not to break the wires while you're doing this, and some of the finer ones do have some really fine wires to them. So does anyone else have trouble with their Christmas lights? I certainly do. Every year I think, oh, I've actually wrapped them up nicely, and the next year I'm like, how did that get tangled again? So there you go. So I pulled that all the way around again. Now I found with the set I've got, there's a gap on the S and the A there, and I find that slots really nicely through that gap. Would do if I could get through. What's going on here? There you go, slots through. And then all I do is at the back, I just put a little daub of hot glue onto the wire itself, just to hold that all in place. And that just takes a few seconds to actually cool down and set. Let's hold that a second. So that's the most I'll do. Now, I've not been picky with where the wires are, as you can see. I want them to be slightly random. I want to be able to tuck things into them. I want to be able to put stuff on top of them. These lights are not going to get that hot that they cause a fire, so don't worry about that one. Just do check that your lights are safe when you actually buy them. So, right, that's all that done. Now, the next element I want to add to this is I'm going to add a bow. So let's move that to one side so you can actually see what I'm doing. Now, I'm using this wide ribbon, and it's got a wire in the edge of it. You can pick this up in most craft stores or most florist stores. There is a wide variety of this. I know there's definitely a red velvet one with a gold trim, which is perfect for Christmas, but I thought this tied on in beautifully with what we're doing. The other thing I'm going to use is I'm actually going to use a clothes peg. And a little bit unusual, I know, but I'm just going to use a clothes peg, and you'll see why in a minute. So I'm going to make one loop with it. Then I'm going to make another loop with it. And when I've got my loops together, and make sure they're roughly the right size, I'm then going to use my clothes peg to just hold the middle while I work on stuff. I'm then going to come in from the back, and I'm going to cut off the excess. As I said, there are lots of different ways of working with this. This just happens to be the way I'm doing it. Now my last piece of ribbon, I'm going to actually unwind it and then fold it in half. I've got more than enough ribbon here. So I'm going to look at my ribbon as if it's about 2/3 of the length of my wood. And then I'm just going to cut off the excess there. Let's put that to one side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave in my peg in place. I'm going to take the middle and I'm going to tie this around the center of my bow. Don't worry about scrunching the ribbon up. It's got wire on it. So therefore, once it's actually all tied together, you're going to be able to straighten this out anyway. So take my peg off now and I can slide that down to the middle. Give it one more tug just so that I've got it all nice and done. That's not what I meant to do. If that does happen to you, just come back around the back and tuck it back into the back of the knot. Now we're going to be using hot glue to glue the bow down, so don't worry about it coming undone. You can easily repair that. So once we've got the loops ready to go, I'm going to move the flat pieces down. Now I'm going to come in and, as I said, I'm going to use hot glue and I'm going to glue it in about here on the molded piece. Now I'm not able to lay this flat at the moment to do this because I need to see where I'm placing it. So I'm putting a liberal amount of hot glue on the back of here just to hold it in place. I'm going to come in, I'm going to push that into my wood and hold it for a few seconds. So there you go, just hold it in there for a few seconds. Once that's nice and set, I've then got my ribbon. I can then work around playing with that image. So let's move that by there. Let's take some of the excess glue off my fingers. Do be careful with the glue. Obviously, it's hot and it's meant to be hot. That's why it's called hot glue. So now what we're going to do is we're going to work on the ends of our ribbons. So I'm going to take the end of my ribbon, fold it in half, and I'm going to cut a V shape down into it to give it a really nice tail. See, that will give me a nice V shape there, and I'm going to do the same thing on this end as well. There you go, get rid of the excess. Now, I want to be able to scrunch my ribbon up a bit and actually tuck it through maybe some of the lights, but I don't mind the lights being behind it because it'll give it more dimension. So take my first ribbon, tip it slightly so I can actually see where I'm going with it, and I'm actually going to bring it all the way down. And then what I'm going to do is when I'm almost ready to be glued down, I'm just going to stick a little dot of glue and actually touch that into place just to secure it, because once it's glued and secured, I can then scrunch the ribbon a little bit more. Now, I'm thinking where I want this other piece of ribbon to go. I think I want this other piece to come up behind here. So I'm just going to work my way around. Again, once it's in position, lift it up slightly. A little bit of hot glue down there. And touch that down. Again, be careful, hot glue is hot. You could do this with non-hot glue. I mean, there are other options out there, but that will then just give me a really nice background for all of the other elements to go onto. So let me just put this to one side to set for a second, and I'll pull in all of the pieces I need to get this project done. So as you can see, I've just pulled out a complete selection of the molded pieces. They're all dried. They're painted as well. As I said, don't forget, in the description box, there will be a link to all of the molds I've used, plus all the instructional videos on how to paint, color, and dust them. So those are there. Let's pull our piece back in. Now, the glue has completely and utterly set on me, which is good. And I'm just going to add the elements onto the piece here. So I've got that in screen just so you can see it. We'll look at the finished article anyway. So I'm going to come in, and what I want to do first of all is I'm going to come in and put some of my larger elements in first. So it's like building up a watercolor. You work with your background and work towards the foreground. And I find the way I do that is to put some of the larger pieces in place, which will give me a structure to glue or stick some of the smaller pieces upon. Again, I'm using hot glue here. You could easily use a gel glue, any glue that you find works best for you. But what I would say is if it's not hot glue, you are going to need to use a glue and then wait for the drying time. And if you're working on a flat like I am here, you've got gravity helping you. However, if you're not working on a flat surface, then of course gravity could work against you. Right, I'm going to periodically tip it towards me just so I can see where we're going with all the different directions. So I think that's a nice variety of pine cones in there, and that just gives me a bit of the background. So I can put my pine cones to one side. If I need more, I can always add more. Now, because I want to add more to this, I'm going to go in now and I'm going to add some of the oak leaves to this. And what I want to do is create a little bit of a colour to it, because I don't want things to look too dark in the finished article. Also, having the leaves in here for the acorns then makes the acorns have a reason to be there as well. So it's always worth thinking things through like that. So again, going to lift it up, have a little bit of a look of it. I think I probably need some sort of colour around that area there. I'm looking for a balance in the overall design. Now, we need to remember too, the hellebores are white and they're quite a large piece. So they are going to cover quite a lot of area. I think I need some sort of leaf down here as well. So if I take one of the smaller ones, and just pop that down on the end there. So I think we're done with the oak leaves now. Let's put those to one side. Now I've got my structure in here. I think I want to start adding maybe the orange slices or the lemon slices, whatever I feel best. And here, and tuck one of those behind there. We're running out of glue stick. I'm going to use lemon and lime and orange in this because I think it'll just look really, really cute in the finished project. Just gives an element of fun almost to what we're looking at. I think one more bit of lime just around here at the back. And again, have a little look, see what it looks like, see how we're going balance-wise. I do quite like that. That's coming together beautifully. Let's put the last slice of that to one side. Now, we're coming to the point where I need to start thinking of other leaves and other elements. Now, I do have a cinnamon stick, and would I put a cinnamon stick in here? Yes, I might put a cinnamon stick in there. So I tend to construct these almost going by instinct. So when I look at them, I'll go, oh, I'll put that in there and I'll put that in there. I don't have an overall plan, although if you're someone who works best by laying things out before you do it, that's completely fine to do as well. So a couple of the holly leaves in here now. As you can see, I'm leaving the top element, which are the hellebores, to the very last. And that's because I want everything around the hellebores to be behind them. That will give me a nice bit of structure to work upon. I was once told by a florist, the secret to a good floral display is lots of foliage. If you have lots of foliage, you need less floral accents within it, and you can use more feature flowers. So I'm treating my hellebores as a feature flower. Now, I'm going to start adding a few of the hellebore leaves as well, just so I've got continuity with those. The reason I like using hot glue is it grabs immediately in the fact that it's on there, it's then on there. I don't have a lot of wiggle room, should I say, not enough time to move things around, but I do like the fact that once it's on, it's on. Let me have another little look as we're going along. I think we need another holly leaf in here as well. Now, when you've got hot glue strings, they will pull off quite easily. Just wait till the whole thing is cold to do that. Right. I think I just want to add a few of the little nuts on here now. And I'm using the acorns, as you saw, because adding the acorns makes sure that the oak leaves have a reason to be there. And a few of the little almonds will look lovely in here as well. So as you can see, you can really just make this your own as far as what you add onto it. You don't need to use all of the molds I'm using, maybe one or two, or maybe even use one or two of the molds you already have at home. I think I can put one more nut down there. I think that's coming along nicely. I'm leaving this area reasonably loose because I do know that I'm going to be putting the hellebores in. Add a few little touches of holly berries in there. The red will just add that little bit of necessary pop to them. One more of those, I think, down at the end. So I think we're about ready to add the hellebores to this. Now the hellebores being quite big, just make sure that you have plenty of room for them. I just remembered I've got one little star anise that I wanted to add. I'm going to add that last because I think I want to put it up here, but I'm not sure yet. I want to see what the balance of this is like. So I'm going to take my hellebores now. I'm going to come in and put them dotted around. Now don't worry if you cover up another element. The thing is, you're going to be seeing this arrangement from different angles anyway. I like the little ones, I think they're so sweet. Also with the hellebore mould, don't forget you're making a hellebore, but if you were to make this in different colours, these could actually just be treated as a fantasy flower. So don't think of them as just hellebores. They could go into your stash of moulds to actually make things for the future. Let's see what we get now. I think we need some more white up here. So maybe if I can tuck maybe, yes, I think we tuck a hellebore in at the top there. And maybe a medium-sized one down there. Now, when you almost finish, stop and take a look at it. So I'm going to tilt this to myself because I need to physically see it. I think we're not bad. I think in here I could possibly do with a leaf. So this is where I can just pull an extra leaf out. They're already made, they're already dried. I just come in and slot a leaf into there. And then I do want to put that star anise up here, I think. It's calling to me. I'll pop that little star anise, just tuck it in the back there. And I think we're done. I didn't add any of the walnuts to it because I thought they were too big of a design. Actually, no, I'm not. I could add a walnut in there. It's all about the Christmas elements, isn't it? And Christmas is definitely a time of opulence. And to be able to add more in is never a problem. I'm going to pop one in there. I think I want to pop one in there as well. So we finished. The only thing I didn't put in was blackberries, and I think I can put a couple of blackberries in here. Give it a real autumnal feel to it. This is the sort of item or home decor piece that if you've got a guest, they will look at for ages because they're going to be able to stare into the piece and they'll find all little hidden elements within it. Put you by there. Right, I think I'm happy with that. I'm just going to take a few seconds to clean off any hot glue strings and then we'll take a closer look at it. So here we are, we've got it all finished, and just let's pop the light on. As you can see, there are little lights dotted all the way through this, and if this was up against a white wall, these lights at the back would reflect just a gentle warm light behind. So if we take a closer look at it over here, you can see that's a really nice, elegant piece. And because it's air drying clay, it will last you for years. Just keep it dust-free and damp-free, and you've got a centerpiece for a mantelpiece, maybe a shelf, back of a bookcase. Wonderful. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. As I said, all of the molds used within this tutorial will actually have links in the description box. Hope you have some fun with this, and we'll see you again. Goodbye from me and goodbye from Katie Sue.